Alright guys, so today I'm going to show you what to look for when you buy a cylinder head. So I got this from one of my customers. He said it was a good condition head. Whether it is or not, we're going to find out. So first thing we're going to look at, it's just been ran through the hot tank, and we're going to look at these wear indicators here. So that's going to be, you can see on the camera, these little tabs here. So first thing you look at is if it's been milled a bunch. Typically you'll see this little circle will have been machined, and so that's about 70-80 thousandths of deck surface normally before you hit that. So this one doesn't look like they're hitting the little pucks here, so looks pretty thick. Next we're gonna blast off the rocker assembly. Nope, they're on there pretty tight. So what I like to do is just, once you get all those off, is just use a stock cam gear. And just spin it around a couple times. This will pop the rocker arm assembly off the dowel so you don't have to fight it and struggle to get it off. So, next we're going to look at, it's going to be all the cam journals. So, as you can see, these ones here actually look pretty good. There's no major scoring or big gashes in them. We're going to look at our camshafts here. This is something you're going to reuse. You need to look at it as well. So again, the journals look about what you'd expect for an almost 30-year-old cylinder head. The lobes will kind of give you some indication of what your rocker arms look like. On the VTEC lobes here, you can start to see, I get the camera to focus. It's a little bit of scarring there, but again, not too bad for 30-year-old cylinder head. So next we're going to go ahead and pop all the springs off. So I'm using this little tool here. Basically has a magnet in the inside to collect all the little valve locks and retainers. I don't know where you buy it. I ended up with this one. Don't remember where it came from. I think I bought a storage unit and this was in it. So you can also use, a lot of guys use just like a socket, an extension to pop these out. That'll work also. You just have to be careful that you're not bashing on this thing, because if you're bashing on it really hard, you're just going to send the valve head right into your table and bend it. Grab a little box to put all of our miscellaneous junk in. So pretty much, I've done a million single cams. So all this, realistically, I have enough stock stuff packed away in bins that I don't need any of it. And the locks themselves, you can reuse them, but I always replace them just because the lock groove on them. These ones look okay, but the little groove where it sits on the valve can wear out and then you drop a valve. So these are cheap. It's cheap insurance, and for the peace of mind that they're all brand new, I always usually like to replace them unless the customer is super broke, then we work with what we got. So next we're gonna look at our valves here. So far, nothing's really jumping out at me as super bent or sticking out at a 45-degree angle, so those look all right. Next, pop the intakes out. It has been sitting for a while. Some of the valves are a little gummed up in the guide. Again, nothing's really jumping out at me, so we're going to take these and put them to the side for now. Along with our rocker assembly. So now we're just going to look for any real big major kind of gashes in the seats. Got a rag. Wipe it off a little bit to get a little better look of what's going on. This one actually looks pretty good here, but there is, I gotta take the camera off the stand for you guys to see this. On the seats here, so you have your, you get a pointer. So on our intake seat here, you have obviously your top cut there, your 45, which the valve writes on there, your bottom cut, and your throat angle. So on our 45 here, so I can get the camera to focus, you can see it's pretty pitted and beat up, so that might seal, probably not. We'll check in a bit. But you can see our exhaust is really starting to break down as far as the sealing angle goes there on the 45. Now we're going to go ahead and pull all these seals off. So if you don't have this tool, you can use pliers and screwdrivers, and you're basically going to struggle for about an hour or more to try and get these out. So typically, when these come off as easy as they are, they're usually pretty burnt out. There's not a whole lot of the Viton material holding it onto the guide anymore. Out, not too much trouble. Nope. Gotta fight. Because if you lose one and you don't have another head, you're going to either take a trip to the junkyard, or I think you can still buy them new from Honda, but they're like $15 each. You might be watching this going, oh, we're just inspecting the head. Why are we taking all the valve seals off? Well, because if you have the valve seals on, you're not going to get a true feel for what your guides feel like. So, this is the way I was kind of taught from older gentlemen. And the quickest way is just go in there and give it a little wiggle test. So there's going to be some play, but as long as it's not clunking back and forth, usually you'll be alright. So when we check these, we'll actually use a solid carbide pilot, which will give us a go, no-go gauge for around what our clearance is going to be. But if you don't have those, this is an easy way to go ahead and do it. The exhaust is usually going to be on the looser side, even from the factory. So our exhaust is not looking good here. And typically, that's what we'll see. Almost every head that comes in here is going to need exhaust guides. Simply because these things are 20, 30 years old at this point, and think about how many times you've replaced guides in the heads you've put on your car. Probably not that many. So another trick you can do is your intake valve. The stem diameter is actually around 1 or 2 thou, sometimes 3 or more thousands thicker than your exhaust. So you can take your intake valve, put it in the exhaust guide, and if it feels really snug, then the guide's usually in pretty good shape. But this one still feels pretty loose even with the larger diameter intake valve. So we'll go grab the pilots and come right back. Okay, so what we have now are our solid Carbide live pilots from Newen we use to cut the valve job. So these are solid Carbide. They go all the way over 4 decimal places. They're the exact size they say, and they don't wear out. So typically what we're going to see on our intake, what we like is 5.5 millimeters exactly. So that seems to go in pretty good. So now we're going to go one size up, which is 5.59. I'm sorry, 5.51 millimeters. So that goes in, that's about 1/2 1,000th of an inch larger diameter than the previous pilot, and it fits in here really pretty snug. So we're going to go ahead and say that the intakes are in pretty good shape. So now we're going to check the exhaust, and as you can see, this basically just falls in here and still has some wiggle to it. So that's going to go ahead and confirm our suspicions of the exhaust guides needing to be replaced. We'll go ahead and put these back. So now we're going to look at our valves and the face. So a trick I learned is you can take a razor blade, which is very straight, and you put it on the face of the valve, and if you see just a hair of light there, that's because the face of the valve, the shiny part, get it to focus, the shiny part there is actually what contacts your seat on the head. So after bouncing up and down for probably 500,000 miles, because this is a D series, it's actually worn away and put a little indent in it. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to wire wheel the face of these really quick just to get all the carbon off, and then we're going to measure and see if they're bent. Okay, so we got the valves all cleaned up so we can check them real quick. So what we're going to do is put them in our special checker here. So now this gauge rides on the actual face of the valve where it contacts the seat. And we're going to push it up against our stop here and give it a spin and see how straight these are. So this one is looking right about just under 2/1000ths of an inch. So obviously if it's perfectly round, that's ideal, but 2/1000ths out of round is going to work just fine. And believe it or not, I've actually used this same gauge on some new valves, like Faria for example, and they've been up to 3 thou out of round fresh out of the package. So like this one is about 1 thou. So I think you guys get the picture there. We don't gotta check each individual one, but we'll do an exhaust here just because. So our exhaust is actually looking pretty good. You know, about 1/1000th of an inch. So, these are looking pretty good. I'm going to check one more just so we can do some vacuum checks. So again, about 1/1000th, which is going to run perfectly fine. So next thing to look at is the tip of the valve. So this is what actually contacts your rockers, and they actually do wear down and make kind of a bowl shape, so those will need to be retipped as well. Okay, so here are our rocker arms. Everything looks pretty good, as well as the cam journals on this side. I don't see anything that's gonna really jump out here and be an issue. So why do we go to this level of depth on a cylinder head inspection? So we do this on all the heads, even if someone just wants a surface job, because 90% of the time when they bring it in for just a surface, it needs a lot more than that. So another thing you can look at here is the chambers. Make sure there's no giant cracks that go all the way down into the port. This one looks okay. There's no real big pitting from detonation. That looks good. Look at all your studs here. This one has one that's broken, so we're gonna have to extract that. Not a deal breaker. And then all the threads on the rocker assembly came out pretty good. There's nothing stripped. I actually had one a couple weeks ago where every single one of these was broken off flesh, and every single exhaust head was broken. They tried to helicoil it, they did a bad job, so I was gonna need the oversized time certs for all the exhaust studs, and it just really didn't make sense to try and save, so we ended up sourcing another core for our customer there. So this is a, not sure if I mentioned it, it's a PO8, which means a Z6 or D15B single stage VTEC. And I think that about covers it, guys. So this one is going to need exhaust guides. Probably going to go ahead and change all the guides to SuperTech, which is my preference. We're going to remachine our seats, the valves. You can probably use them, they're in good shape, but I always like to go with SuperTech just because they are really nice for the price. And do some surfacing and get it all cleaned up. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a link in the description for all the cool tools you guys might want. The seal puller, our magnet, lock, chingus, whatever you want to call it, and our valve concentricity gauge, the Baker precision indicator. So if this is something you guys, you're working on your car, your friend's car a lot, you might be interested in these tools, I'd suggest you buy them because it makes your life a lot easier. But the average guy that's going to do this once or twice in his life, you can struggle with screwdrivers and pliers pulling the seals off, and that's about it. So thanks for watching.